My name is Harper. I am 29 years old. By day, I work as a crisis management specialist, fixing the ruined reputations of Chicago elite. By night, apparently, I am the disappointment of the Carter family. It was Christmas Eve, and the snow was coming down hard outside our suburban home in Naperville. Inside, the fireplace was crackling, but the tension was cold enough to see your breath. We were at the dinner table. The smell of roast beef and pine needles usually brings comfort, but tonight it smelled like betrayal. I had just handed my mother Susan a small white box. Inside were specialized supplements for her arthritis that I had imported from Switzerland. They cost me $600, but because they were not wrapped in gold foil, my father David scoffed. He slid the box across the table until it nearly fell off the edge. He did not even say thank you. Then the performance began. My brother, Lucas, the golden child who has not held a steady job in 4 years, stood up. His wife Tiana, a woman who smiles with her mouth but never her eyes, clapped her hands. Lucas pulled a key fob out of his pocket, a Lexus key fob. He pointed out the window to a silver sedan with a red bow on top. Mom screamed with delight. Dad looked at Lucas like he was the second coming of Christ. They did not know Lucas had leased it under a predatory rate, and the repo man was likely already tracking it. My father stood up to make a toast. He held his crystal glass high. He looked at Lucas and said, "Thank you, son, for being the one to carry this family legacy." Then he turned his cold gaze on me. He said, "It is a relief to have one child who contributes, unlike others, who just exist to be a burden." The table went silent. Tiana smirked behind her napkin. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I did not break. I just reached for my wine glass. That is when it happened. My father's phone, sitting face up on the white tablecloth, lit up with a harsh blue light. It was a push notification from the bank. Because the room was so quiet, the vibration sounded like a gunshot. My father glanced down. I watched the color drain from his face faster than the wine in his glass. The notification read, "Foreclosure, notice eviction process initiated." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with terror. He knew I saw it. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, smiled a terrifyingly calm smile, and broke the silence. I asked him simply, "What is the matter, Dad? Does the bank not accept family pride as a valid form of payment?" The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Before I tell you how I secretly bought my parents' mortgage 3 years ago and why I decided to execute that eviction notice on Christmas morning, please hit that like button and subscribe. Comment below with your city and time zone so I can say hello. Now let me tell you how I became the villain in my own family story. My father's fingers were trembling so hard he could barely hit the recall button on his phone. He put the device to his ear, his face a mask of sweaty desperation, and the vein in his forehead pulsed with a dangerous rhythm. I watched him with a detachment that scared even me. He was screaming at an automated operator, demanding to speak to a supervisor, asking how they dared to threaten him on a holiday. He paced back and forth across the dining room, dragging the heavy silence of the room along with him. He did not know that the number on the caller ID redirected to a private voicemail box that I checked every Sunday evening. He did not know that he was screaming at a ghost system I had set up to monitor the asset. He did not know that 3 years ago, this house was not just underwater, it was at the bottom of the ocean. My father had leveraged the equity to fund a startup idea that went nowhere, a foolish venture into luxury golf carts that no one wanted. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings on a Tuesday in November. I remembered it clearly because it was the same week I closed my first 6-figure contract. My parents had received a letter saying their mortgage had been restructured and they were safe. They popped champagne that night. They thanked God. They thanked their lucky stars. They never once asked who owned Hallowell Holdings, the mysterious LLC that had purchased their distressed debt for pennies on the dollar. They never dug into the public records to see that the sole signatory was their disappointment of a daughter. I remembered sitting in my lawyer's office downtown when I made that decision. The mahogany desk was covered in paperwork, and the city lights blurred in the rain against the window. My lawyer, Sarah, had looked at me over her reading glasses and asked if I was sure. She told me it was a bad investment. She said buying the debt of a sinking ship was financial suicide, especially when the captains of that ship treated me like a stowaway. I signed the papers anyway. I formed the shell company. I bought the note. I paid off the arrears. I became my parents' bank without them ever knowing. I did it because, despite everything, I still wanted them to have a roof over their heads. I wanted to protect them from their own incompetence. I let them believe a clerical error had saved them. That was my mistake. I let them keep their pride, and they used that pride as a weapon to beat me down. To them, I was not the owner of Hallowell Holdings. I was Harper the dropout, Harper the quitter. 7 years ago, I walked away from a full scholarship at medical school 2 semesters before graduation. The memory of that day still hung in this dining room like stale smoke. My mother had screamed that I was throwing away a 6-figure future. My father refused to look at me for months, telling the neighbors I was taking a sabbatical for mental health reasons because he was too ashamed to say I chose a different path. They did not understand that I was not quitting because I was not smart enough. I was quitting because I had found something I was better at. I had a knack for controlling narratives, for spinning the truth, for making problems disappear. I built my firm from a laptop in a studio apartment, eating instant noodles and working 20 hours a day. By the time I was 26, I was billing $400 an hour. By 28, I was on retainer for 2 of the biggest tech firms in Chicago. I learned how to bury a scandal under positive search results. I learned how to negotiate with blackmailers. I learned that the truth is just a raw material that can be shaped into whatever the highest bidder wants it to be. I became a ghost in the corporate world, a cleaner. And ghosts do not get applause at Thanksgiving dinners. Ghosts do not get their pictures on the mantle. Ghosts just pay the bills from the shadows and watch the living take the credit. My parents saw my freelance lifestyle and assumed I was struggling. They saw my designer jeans and assumed they were knockoffs. They saw my silence, shame, not discretion. They saw me on my laptop and assumed I was begging for data entry gigs. They had no idea that the crisis I manage involves senators caught in hotel rooms and CEOs with offshore accounts. They do not know that my hourly rate is higher than what Lucas makes in a month. And Tiana fed off that dynamic like a parasite. She sat across from me now, swirling her glass of Chardonnay. She watched my father panic with a bored expression before turning her predatory gaze on me. She needed to deflect attention from the Lexus leasing disaster, and I was the easiest target. Tiana hated me because she could not figure me out. She was a creature of surface-level materialism. To her, value was something you wore on your wrist or drove in the driveway. She could not understand a power that did not advertise itself. She saw my lack of flash as a lack of cash, Harper. She said, her voice loud enough to cut through my father's shouting. You are being awfully quiet. I guess you are used to these kinds of financial struggles, right? It must be hard living gig to gig without a steady paycheck. I did not respond. I just swirled my wine, watching the red liquid coat the glass. She continued, emboldened by my silence. You know, Lucas and I were talking the other night. We are really worried about your future. You're almost 30, and you have nothing to show for it. No husband, no career, no assets. It is embarrassing for mom and dad to have to explain what you do to their friends. You are basically invisible, Harper. My mother stopped crying long enough to chime in. She wiped her eyes with a napkin and nodded aggressively. Tiana is right, Harper. We just want you to be stable. Look at your brother. He is a director of sales. He takes care of his family. He brings honor to this house. I almost laughed. Director of Sales was a title Lucas gave himself for a multi-level marketing scheme selling protein shakes that nobody bought. But I kept my face neutral. Tiana leaned in, her fake eyelashes fluttering. Look, Harper, we are family. If you are struggling to make rent this month, just say so. I can Venmo you $50 right now. Consider it a Christmas gift. We have to look out for the less fortunate, right? $50. She offered it with the benevolence of a queen throwing a crust of bread to a beggar. She had no idea that the earrings she was wearing were fake, or that I knew exactly how maxed out her credit cards were. She had no idea that the woman she was pitying could buy and sell her entire life with a single wire transfer. My father slammed his phone down on the table, making the silverware rattle. They put me on hold. He roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. The audacity. Do they not know who I am? I looked from my father's red face to Tiana's smug smile. The contrast was perfect. The man who thought he was a king, but was actually a pauper. And the woman who thought she was a savior, but was actually a leech. And me, the failure, the disappointment, the bank I set my wine glass down. The sound of the glass hitting the wood was soft but final. I decided it was time to stop the flashback and start the fire. You are right, Tiana, I said, my voice steady and cold. $50 is a lot of money, but I think you are going to need it more than I do, especially since the repo man is not the only one coming for a visit tomorrow. Tiana's smile faltered. What are you talking about? She snapped. I leaned forward. My father stopped shouting. My mother stopped sniffling. I am talking about the fact that Hallowell Holdings is not just a bank, Dad. It is an LLC. And do you know who the sole managing member of that LLC is? I let the question hang in the air. The silence returned heavier than before. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. The silence that followed my question about the LLC was heavy, but it was short-lived because chaos has a way of finding my brother Lucas. Just as the tension in the room began to suffocate us, a piercing digital ringtone shattered the atmosphere. It was coming from Lucas's jacket pocket. He jumped in his seat, knocking his fork against his china plate with a loud clatter. He fumbled for the device, his face already slick with a sheen of nervous sweat. I watched him check the screen. His eyes darted to Tiana, then to our parents, then back to the phone. He tried to silence it to send it to voicemail, but his clumsy fingers hit the speaker button instead. The volume was set to maximum. A robotic yet stern female voice filled the dining room. This is a final notification from Prestige Luxury Leasing regarding the Lexus ES350. Your initial down payment has been returned due to insufficient funds, and your credit card has been declined for the security deposit. We have dispatched a recovery team to retrieve the vehicle. Please do not attempt to move the asset. Lucas scrambled to shut the phone off his face, turning a shade of pale that matched the tablecloth. He finally managed to end the call, but the damage was done. The robotic words hung in the air, mixing with the smell of the cooling roast beef. Recovery team. Insufficient funds. Declined. My father blinked, his confusion cutting through his earlier anger. Lucas, what was that? What do they mean, recovery team? You said you bought the car. You said it was a gift. Tiana jumped in before Lucas could stammer out a lie. She placed a hand on his arm and flashed a bright artificial smile at my parents. Oh, Dad, you know how these banks are during the holidays. It is a security protocol. We just made some very large investments this morning, moving money around for tax purposes, and the bank probably froze the card as a precaution. It is a glitch, a silly computer error. She laughed, but it sounded like glass breaking. Lucas nodded vigorously. Right, exactly. It is just a fraud alert because we are spending so much money on gifts. I will call them back and clear it up in 5 minutes. Do not worry about it. I took a slow bite of my dinner, chewing thoroughly. I knew exactly what kind of investments Lucas made. Sports betting apps and crypto scams, there was no glitch. His credit score was likely in the double digits. But my mother, Susan, desperate to maintain the illusion of her perfect son, latched onto the excuse. Of course it is a mistake. My Lucas would never have money troubles. These banks are incompetent. Then she turned her eyes toward me. The warmth she had shown Lucas vanished, replaced by a cold, expectant stare. The look she gave me was one I had known since childhood. It was the look that meant I was expected to fix a mess I did not create. Harper, she said, her voice sharp, give your brother your credit card. I paused my fork halfway to my mouth. I looked at her. Excuse me, you heard me, she snapped. The bank made a mistake with Lucas's account, but we cannot have a tow truck showing up here on Christmas Eve. It would be humiliating if the neighbors saw. Give him your card to put down the deposit until his funds clear. He will pay you back next week. I looked at Lucas. He refused to meet my eyes, but he held his hand out palm up, expecting the plastic. Tiana was inspecting her manicure, pretending this was a reasonable request. Mom, I said, keeping my voice low, that deposit is likely $3,000. I am not giving Lucas $3,000. My father slammed his fist on the table. The wine glasses shook. Do not be selfish, Harper. Your brother just bought us a car. The least you can do is help him handle a clerical error. You have no expenses. You live like a hermit. What else are you spending money on? The audacity was breathtaking. They truly believed that my money was family property, while Lucas's money was his own. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was not the heat of anger anymore. It was the chill of absolute clarity. I am not doing it, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was final. Tiana scoffed. Wow. I knew you were jealous, Harper, but I did not think you were this petty. You would rather see mom and dad upset than help your own brother. My mother's face twisted. You are an ungrateful child. We raised you. We fed you. And now when your family needs a tiny favor, you act like this. Give him the card, Harper. Now, no. The word hung there. Simple. Unyielding. My father stood up. His chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. His face was purple, the veins in his neck bulging. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. "Get out!" he roared. I looked up at him calmly. "What did you say?" "I said, get out of my house." My father screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "If you cannot be part of this family, if you cannot support your brother, then you do not belong at this table. You are a failure, Harper, a selfish, cold-hearted failure. I do not want you here. Take your cheap vitamins and get out of my house." My mother did not stop him. She looked at me with disgust. "You heard your father. Go, and do not come back until you learn how to treat your family with respect." Tiana smirked, victorious. Lucas finally looked at me, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. They had won. They had successfully scapegoated me again, pushing me out to protect their fragile egos. I stood up slowly. I picked up my napkin and folded it neatly, placing it on the table. I picked up my purse. I did not yell. I did not cry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "I am leaving," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "But before I go, I have one phone call to make." I tapped the screen. I did not dial a number. I opened a contact I had saved as priority 1. I hit the call button and pressed the speaker icon. I held the phone up in the center of the room. The line rang once, twice. My father was about to yell again to tell me to get out faster when the line connected. A clear professional voice filled the room. This was not a recording. This was a man's voice, deep and authoritative. "Good evening, Miss Carter. This is Robert Sterling, Director of Private Wealth at Chase Bank. Merry Christmas." I smiled at my father. His mouth hung open. He knew that name. He knew Chase Bank held the mortgage on this house. "Merry Christmas, Robert," I said, keeping my eyes locked on my father's face. "I apologize for disturbing your holiday dinner." "Not at all, Miss Carter," the voice replied. "For our most key account holder, I'm always available. Is there a problem with the transaction?" "No problem, Robert," I said. "I am just calling to confirm the status of the property at 45 Maple Avenue. The paperwork we discussed last week regarding the deed transfer." There was a rustling of papers on the other end of the line. "Yes, I have the file right here. As of 9 a.m. this morning, the transfer is complete. The title has been fully shifted from the distressed asset pool to your holding company, Hallowell LLC. You are the sole legal owner of the property, Miss Carter." The room was so quiet, you could hear the snow hitting the windows outside. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Lucas looked like he was going to be sick. "Thank you, Robert," I said. "I have one more question. Since I am currently standing in the property and the previous occupants are becoming somewhat hostile, I need to know my options. Regarding the residents, David and Susan Carter, do you want me to have your legal team send the eviction notice for tomorrow morning, or should we give them until next week to pack their things?" Robert's voice was crisp and businesslike. "It is entirely up to you, Miss Carter. Since there is no lease agreement in place, they are technically trespassing if you revoke your consent. We can have the sheriff serve the papers at dawn if you prefer." I looked at my father. He had collapsed back into his chair. He looked small, defeated. The man who had just screamed at me to get out of his house now realized he was sitting in mine. I held the phone closer to him. "What do you think, Robert?" They seem quite comfortable. Maybe dawn is best. The silence that followed was not just quiet. It was the sound of a world ending. I ended the call with the bank manager and placed my phone gently on the table face down. The screen was dark, but the room was electric. My father, David, was slumped in his chair looking like a man who had just watched his entire world crumble. His face was no longer red with anger. It was gray. He looked at the walls of the dining room, the crown molding he was so proud of, the chandelier he claimed was an antique. And finally, he looked at me. For the first time in 29 years, he did not look at me with disappointment. He looked at me with fear. "You bought it," he whispered. His voice was so quiet, I could hear the wind howling outside. "You own Hallowell Holdings." I nodded slowly. Hallowell was the name of the street where my first studio apartment was located. The apartment you refused to visit because you said it was in a bad neighborhood. When the bank was preparing to auction off this house 3 years ago, I stepped in. I bought the non-performing note. I restructured the debt. I paid the property taxes you ignored for 2 years. For 3 years, I have been your landlord. I have been the roof over your head. And for 3 years, you have sat at this table and called me a failure while living on my charity. My mother, Susan, let out a strangled sob. She covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes darting between me and my father. But we thought it was a miracle, she stammered. We thought the bank made a mistake. We thought God was watching out for us. God was busy, Mom, I said coldly. I was the one watching out for you. I did not want to embarrass you. I wanted you to keep your dignity. I wanted you to retire in peace. But apparently my silence was not interpreted as kindness. It was interpreted as weakness. And tonight, you decided to kick the weak link out of the pack. Lucas was staring at me, his mouth slightly open, a piece of roast beef falling from his fork. He looked like a child trying to comprehend quantum physics. You own the house, he repeated dumbly, so you can kick us out. Legally, I can have the sheriff remove you for trespassing, I said. But because I am not the monster you think I am, I will give you the standard legal courtesy. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was fascinating to watch. The moment the power dynamic flipped, the predators became the prey, and the prey became the desperate scavengers. And leading the pack of scavengers was Tiana. My sister-in-law, who 10 minutes ago had been laughing at my financial status, pushed her chair back. She stood up and walked around the table. Her movements were fluid, almost dance-like. The smirk was gone, replaced by a look of deep concern and exaggerated admiration. She reached for the wine bottle and moved toward my glass. Here, Harper, let me top that off for you, she said, her voice dripping with sudden sweetness. You know, I was just telling Lucas the other day that you are so mysterious. I always knew there was more to you than meets the eye. You're a business genius. Buying distressed debt. That is so smart. I watched her pour the wine. Her hand was shaking slightly. She continued, her eyes pleading for a connection. You know, we were just joking earlier. About the $50. That is just how families tease each other, right? We are sisters, Harper. We have to stick together. I mean, imagine what we could do together. With your capital and Lucas's sales connections and my vision, we could be a power team. She placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt like a cold, damp claw. We can forget about all this eviction nonsense, right, she could. We are family. And hey, now that we know you are successful, maybe you can help us with that Lexus situation. It is just a small bridge loan, really. I looked at her hand on my shoulder, then up at her face. The desperation in her eyes was pathetic. She was terrified of losing the lifestyle she had leached off my parents for years. Take your hand off me, Tiana, I said softly. She pulled back as if burned, laughing nervously. Oh, come on, Harper. Don't be like that. We are all stressed. By the way, I love your earrings. Are those real diamonds? I have always said you have the best taste. I stood up. I walked over to the fireplace where my mother's jewelry box usually sat on the mantel. It was a decorative piece, but Mom kept her daily rotation items there. Speaking of taste, Tiana, I said, turning to face the room, I think we need to discuss another asset. Mom, do you remember that vintage sapphire necklace Grandma left you, the one you wore to Lucas's wedding? My mother looked up, confused by the change of subject. Yes, of course. It is my most tracking possession. I keep it in the safe upstairs. Why? Because I saw Tiana wearing it 2 weeks ago. I lied smoothly. I did not see her wearing it. I saw the transaction record. Tiana's face went white. Whatever color remained after the eviction notice drained away instantly. What are you talking about? She squeaked. I never touched it. I pulled up a photo on my phone. It was a screenshot from an online luxury consignment shop. The listing was titled Vintage Art Deco Sapphire Pendant. The seller's handle was Tlux88, Tiana's Instagram handle. Really, I asked, showing the phone to my mother, because according to this listing on the Real, it was sold 14 days ago for $4,000. The funds were deposited into a checking account ending in 4599. That is your account, isn't it, Tiana? My mother let out a scream that shattered the remaining tension. She scrambled up from her chair, knocking it over. She ran to me and grabbed the phone, her eyes scanning the screen. That is my necklace, she shrieked. That is my mother's necklace. She turned on Tiana. You thief. You told me I must have misplaced it. You told me I was getting senile and forgetting where I put things. I spent 3 days tearing my bedroom apart, crying because I thought I lost it. Tiana backed away, raising her hands in surrender. Susan, wait. Let me explain. It is not what it looks like. I was just borrowing it to get it appraised. I was going to buy it back. I just needed some liquidity for a margin call. The market took a dip and I did not want to worry Lucas. Lucas stood up, his face turning red. You sold Mom's necklace, he yelled. You told me you got that $4,000 from a bonus at work. You used it to pay off your credit card, not the market. Shut up, Lucas. Tiana snapped, her mask falling completely. You think your protein shake money pays for my manicures. You think this family runs on love. I did what I had to do. You stole from me, my mother screamed, lunging at Tiana. My father had to hold her back. The room descended into chaos. My mother was wailing about her heirloom. Tiana was shouting that she was the only one trying to keep up appearances. Lucas was yelling about betrayal. I stood in the center of the storm, completely untouched. I took a sip of my wine. It was a cheap Merlot, but in that moment it tasted like victory. They were tearing each other apart. The perfect family unit. The golden child. The devoted wife. The loving parents. All of it was a lie held together by my money and their delusions. Enough, I said. I did not shout, but my voice cut through the noise like a blade. They all stopped panting, looking at me. I do not care about the necklace, I said. That is a matter for the police if Mom chooses to call them. I do not care about your margin calls, Tiana. And Lucas, I certainly do not care about your Lexus. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold winter air rushed in, carrying snowflakes onto the pristine entryway rug. You have 30 days, I said. My father looked at me broken. Harper, please. It is Christmas. You have 30 days, I repeated. Technically, since you have no lease, I could kick you out tonight. But I am giving you 30 days to find a new place to pack your lies and your ego and get out of my property. January 24th. That is the deadline. If you are not out by noon, I will have the sheriff remove you and I will change the locks. But where will we go? My mother sobbed. We have no money. The necklace was our emergency fund. I looked at her without pity. Maybe you should ask Lucas. He is the one who brings honor to this family, remember. Let him provide for you. Or maybe Tiana can sell some more of your jewelry to pay for a deposit on an apartment. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling my coat tight around me. Harper, wait. My father called out. You cannot do this. We are your parents. I turned back one last time. You stopped being my parents the moment you valued your pride over my existence, I said. You wanted a successful child. You got one. You just bet on the wrong horse. I walked down the driveway to my car, leaving the door open behind me. I could hear them screaming at each other again before I even started the engine. The wind was cold, but for the first time in years, I felt warm. I drove away, leaving the house on Maple Avenue glowing in the rearview mirror, knowing that for them, the long, dark winter had just begun. I drove away from my parents' house that Christmas Eve with a feeling of lightness I had not experienced in years. The rearview mirror held the image of the home I legally owned but had never felt welcome in. I thought the hard part was over. I thought the battle lines were drawn and the terms were set. I naively believed that giving them 30 days was a mercy that would be met with quiet resignation. I forgot who I was dealing with. I forgot that when you corner a narcissist, they do not reflect on their actions. They attack. And I forgot that Tiana, my sister-in-law, was not just a leech. She was a media manipulator of the highest order. I arrived at my apartment in downtown Chicago around midnight. My sanctuary. It was a sleek, modern unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. I poured myself a glass of water, turned off my phone, and fell into a deep, exhaustion-filled sleep. I slept the sleep of the just. I did not know that while I was sleeping, my family was awake. I did not know that while I was dreaming of freedom, they were drafting a war declaration. I woke up the next morning, not to the sound of an alarm, but to a relentless buzzing. My phone on the nightstand was vibrating so hard it was dancing across the glass surface. It sounded like an angry hornet. I groggily reached for it, squinting against the morning sun. The screen was a blur of notifications, 47 missed calls, 112 text messages, and over 500 notifications from Facebook and Instagram. My stomach dropped. In my line of work as a crisis manager, a blowing up phone is never good news. It usually means a client has been arrested or a scandal has broken. But these were not client numbers. These were people from my personal life, old high school friends, neighbors from my parents' subdivision, distant cousins I had not spoken to in a decade. I opened Facebook. The first thing on my feed was a post shared by Tiana. It had been posted at 3 in the morning. It already had 2,000 shares. The photo attached to the post was a masterclass in manipulation. It showed my mother Susan sitting at the kitchen table. She was not wearing her usual jewelry or makeup. Tiana had clearly staged the shot to make her look frail and elderly. Her head was in her hands, and my father was standing behind her, looking stoic and defeated. The caption read, "Please pray for our family." I debated posting this, but the injustice is too great to stay silent. Last night on Christmas Eve, our family was blindsided by cruelty. My husband's sister, Harper Carter, who we have supported and loved through her years of unemployment and instability, revealed her true colors. We found out that through a legal loophole and corporate trickery, she has seized ownership of my in-laws' home. The home they built, the home they raised her in. She laughed in their faces and served them with an eviction notice during Christmas dinner. She gave these elderly, disabled grandparents 30 days to get out on the street. She has become a heartless corporate shark who values money over blood. We are devastated. We are terrified. We do not know where we will go. Please share this so the world knows what kind of person Harper Carter really is. Hashtag elder abuse, hashtag corporate greed, hashtag heartless. I sat up in bed, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with a cold, white-hot rage. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. Unemployment, instability, loophole. She had taken the truth that I bought the debt to save them and twisted it into a narrative of theft. She had weaponized my silence about my career against me. Because I never bragged about my success, people believed I was struggling. So the narrative that I somehow tricked them out of the house made sense to the outside world. I started reading the comments. It was a digital lynch mob. A woman named Brenda, who lived 3 doors down from my parents, wrote, "I always knew there was something off about Harper. She was always so quiet and stuck up. To do this to her own parents is evil," my high school gym teacher commented. "Disgusting behavior. Money changes people. I hope she rots in that house alone." A stranger wrote, "I looked her up. She runs a PR firm downtown. Is this the kind of person you want managing your reputation? Boycott her business. Let us make her famous." My chest tightened. This was not just family drama anymore. This was a targeted strike on my livelihood. Tiana knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that in the court of public opinion, the truth matters less than the emotion. And she had painted a picture of a poor elderly couple being thrown into the snow by a villainous, ungrateful daughter. I needed coffee. I needed to think. I put on a robe and went to the kitchen, but the buzzing of the phone followed me. I needed to get out of the apartment for a second to breathe fresh air. I decided to go down to my car to retrieve the rest of my things from the night before. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. My building was secure. It had a doorman and cameras. I felt safe here. But as I walked toward my reserved spot, I saw something that made me freeze. My car, a pristine black sedan, was a mess. Someone had gotten into the garage, probably by tailgating another resident in. The windshield was plastered with eggs. The yellow yolks were freezing in the winter air, creating a sticky web across the glass. Someone had dumped a bag of flour on the hood, creating a paste with the eggs. And tucked under the windshield wiper was a handwritten note on torn notebook paper. It read, "Honor thy father and mother." I stood there staring at the vandalism. The smell of raw egg was nauseating. My hands clenched into fists. This was how fast it happened. In less than 8 hours, Tiana had turned me from a savior into a pariah. The neighbors in my parents' suburb must have tracked down my address. They thought they were being vigilantes. They thought they were fighting for justice. They had no idea they were vandalizing the car of the woman who had paid for their neighbor's heart medication for 5 years. I took a picture of the car. Evidence. Always gather evidence. That is rule number 1 of my job. Then my phone rang again. This time the name on the screen made my blood run cold. It was not a family member. It was not a troll. It was Marcus Sterling. Marcus was the CEO of failing airline that I was currently rebranding. His contract was worth $2 million a year to my firm. He was my biggest client. He was the reason I could afford this apartment and the mortgage on my parents' house. He never called on weekends, never on holidays. I cleared my throat trying to sound like the professional I was supposed to be. I answered, "Merry Christmas, Marcus. To what do I owe the pleasure?" There was no warmth in his voice. "Harper, We need to talk. My heart hammered against my ribs. Is everything okay with the press release? I asked, feigning ignorance. Cut the crap, Harper Marcus said. His voice was sharp, clipped, businesslike. I just got off the phone with my board of directors. Someone sent them a link to a Facebook post. Something about you evicting your elderly parents on Christmas Eve. I closed my eyes. Tiana had tagged my business page. Of course she had. She wanted to burn it all down. Marcus, listen, I said, keeping my voice steady. That post is a fabrication. It is a family dispute that has been blown out of proportion and distorted. My sister-in-law is upset because I cut off her financial supply. I own that house because I saved them from foreclosure years ago. I do not care about the details. Harper Marcus interrupted, and neither does the board. What we care about is optics. You are a crisis manager. Your job is to make us look good, to clean up our messes. How can you clean up our image when you look like a monster in your own backyard? He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We are in the middle of a delicate merger, he continued. We cannot have our lead PR strategist trending on Twitter for elder abuse. It is a liability. The board wants to terminate your contract, effective immediately. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The air in the garage felt suddenly thin. Marcus, you cannot be serious. You know my work. You know my ethics. This is a personal vendetta from a desperate relative. I know you are good, Harper Marcus said, and his voice softened just a fraction. That is why I convinced them to give you a window. I bought you time, but not much. How much time, I asked. 48 hours, he said. You have 48 hours to make this go away. I want a retraction. I want that post deleted. I want a statement from your parents clearing your name. If this story is still alive by Tuesday morning, we are walking. And Harper, if we walk, other clients will follow. You will be toxic. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stood alone in the cold concrete garage, staring at my egg-covered car. The silence was deafening. My family had not just hurt my feelings. They had launched a nuclear strike on my existence. Tiana and Lucas were not just trying to stay in the house. They were trying to destroy my ability to pay for it. They were trying to break me financially, so I would be forced to crawl back to them, or at least suffer as much as they were. They thought this would make me crumble. They thought that by attacking my reputation, they would force me to apologize to give them the house back just to stop the bleeding. They thought I would trade the deed for silence. They were wrong. I looked at the reflection of my face in the side mirror. I did not look like a victim. I looked like a general surveying a battlefield. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sharp scent of winter and sulfur. I pulled out my phone and opened my contact list. I scrolled past the family group chat. I scrolled past the friends who were currently leaving hate comments. I stopped at a number I had not used in a long time, but kept for emergencies. It was a private investigator named Silas, a man who could find dirt on a saint, a man who owed me a favor. Tiana wanted a war. She wanted to play dirty. She thought she was controlling the narrative because she had a Facebook account and a sob story, but she forgot one thing. She was playing checkers. I was playing chess, and I was about to bring the queen out. I dialed the number. Silas, I said. When he answered, I have a job for you. I need you to look into a checking account and a luxury leasing agreement, and I need everything you can find on a woman named Tiana Carter. Dig deep. I want to know where every dollar she has spent in the last 5 years came from. I walked back toward the elevator, leaving the mess on my car for later. I had a career to save, and I had a family to dismantle piece by piece. The smear campaign was their opening move. My counterattack would be the endgame. I did not reply to the Facebook comments. I did not engage with the trolls who were calling for my business to be burned to the ground. In my line of work, you learn very quickly that arguing with a mob is like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. It only feeds the oxygen. Instead, I sat in the silence of my home office and waited for the only thing that matters in a court of law. Facts. Silas, my private investigator, was expensive, but he was worth every penny. He did not work on rumors, he worked on data trails. While Tiana was busy crafting her next tearful status update about how I was ruining Christmas, Silas was digging through the digital bedrock of my brother's life. It took him less than 6 hours to find what I needed. When the email arrived with the subject line, Priority Review Findings, I hesitated for a moment before opening it. I knew my family was dysfunctional. I knew they were entitled, but I was not prepared for the level of criminal betrayal I was about to see. I opened the file. The first page was a credit report, but it was not Lucas's credit report. It was mine. Or at least it was supposed to be mine. At the top of the page, under the name Harper Carter, were 3 active credit card accounts that I had never opened. One from American Express, one from Chase Sapphire, and one from a high-interest lender that preyed on desperate people. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I scanned the dates. The first card was opened 3 years ago, just a month after I had moved out and started my company. The most recent one was opened last week. I scrolled down to the transaction history and my stomach turned. These were not charges for groceries or essentials. These were charges for a lifestyle my brother could not afford but felt entitled to live. There were charges for bottle service at nightclubs in downtown Chicago. There were charges for online sports betting sites, thousands of dollars lost in seconds. There were charges for luxury handbags from websites that did not offer refunds. And there were charges for a tropical vacation to Cabo San Lucas that Tiana had posted about on Instagram, claiming she had won a sales contest at work. She had not won a contest. I had paid for it, or rather my credit score had paid for it. I looked at the total outstanding debt. $53,420. I sat back in my chair feeling the room spin. This was not just borrowing money without asking. This was federal identity theft. Lucas had used my social security number, which he likely found on old tax documents in my parents' house, to impersonate me. He had used a P.O. box in a neighboring town to receive the physical cards, so I would never see the statements. He had been systematically destroying my financial future to fund his delusions of grandeur. For a moment, I felt a wave of nausea. This was my brother. We had played in the snow together in that backyard. We had shared secrets. And for 3 years, he had looked me in the eye at every family gathering, knowing he was committing a felony against me. When he gave me that smug look at dinner, it was not just arrogance. It was the look of a thief who thought he was smarter than his victim. My phone buzzed. It was Silas. "You saw the report?" he asked. His voice was gravelly and devoid of emotion. "I saw it," I whispered. "Are you sure it was him?" Silas snorted. "I have the IP addresses, Harper. The applications were submitted from the Wi-Fi network at 45 Maple Avenue. The recovery email address linked to the accounts is lucasking88@gmail.com. And I have footage from an ATM near his gym where he used the cash advance feature on the Amex. It is airtight. This is not a mistake. This is systematic fraud." I closed my eyes. I thought about the ultimatum from my boss, Marcus. I had 48 hours to clear my name. If I did nothing, this debt would eventually default. My credit score would crash. My security clearance for my government contracts would be revoked. I would lose my business. I would lose everything I had built. I had 2 choices. I could pay off the debt quietly, swallow the $50,000 loss, and let Lucas get away with it again to protect the family name. Or I could do what a stranger would do. I could report the crime. I looked at the picture of my car covered in eggs. I looked at the hateful comments on my business page, accusing me of elder abuse. I thought about my father screaming at me to get out of the house I owned. "Do it," I said to Silas. "Send the package to the fraud department at the precinct. And Silas, make sure they know about the flight risk. Tiana has been looking up non-extradition countries on her browser history." I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking from the adrenaline of pulling the trigger. I filled out the FTC identity theft affidavit online. I attached the evidence Silas had gathered. I hit submit. The wheels of justice turn slowly for the poor, but they turn remarkably fast when you have a pristine paper trail and a high-value victim. Because the amount was over $50,000, this was not a misdemeanor. It was a Class 2 felony. The next morning, the sun rose over the suburbs of Chicago, casting long shadows over the snow. I did not go to my parents' house. I did not need to. I still had access to the Ring doorbell camera on the front porch. I sat in my office drinking black coffee and watching the live feed on my monitor. At 8:15 in the morning, my father opened the front door to pick up the newspaper. He looked tired. He probably thought the worst was over. He probably thought that his little girl was at home crying and that eventually I would come crawling back with an apology and a checkbook. Then a black SUV pulled into the driveway, followed by a marked police cruiser. My father stood up straighter, puffed out his chest. He probably thought they were here for me. He probably thought I had sent them to enforce the eviction, or maybe he thought the neighbors had called the cops on me for some reason. He looked ready to give a speech. He looked ready to play the victim one more time. Two officers walked up the path. One of them was a detective in a cheap suit. The other was a uniformed officer with his hand resting near his belt. My father stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "Officers," he said, his voice loud enough for the camera to pick up. "I assume you are here about the eviction threats my daughter has been making. We are elderly people and we have rights." The detective did not smile. He did not look sympathetic. He looked bored. "Are you David Carter?" he asked. "Yes, I am," my father said, crossing his arms. "And I want to file a counter-complaint against Harper Carter for harassment." "Sir, we are not here for Harper Carter," the detective said. "We are here for Lucas Carter. Is he inside?" My father froze. "Lucas? Why do you want to see Lucas? My son is a respectable businessman. We have a warrant for his arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny," the detective said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "We also have a search warrant for the premises to confiscate any electronic devices used in the commission of these crimes. Please step aside, sir." My father did not move. He could not move. His brain was trying to process the information and failing. Lucas, a criminal. Just then, the noise must have attracted attention because my mother and Lucas appeared in the hallway behind my father. Lucas was wearing his silk pajamas, holding a mug of coffee. He looked sleepy and annoyed. "Dad, what is going on?" he asked. "Tell them to get off our property." The detective saw him. "Lucas Carter," he shouted. "Step out onto the porch with your hands where I can see them." Lucas dropped his mug. It shattered on the floor, hot coffee splashing everywhere. He looked at the police, then he looked at the driveway as if thinking about running. "Do not even think about it, son," the detective warned, stepping forward. Lucas walked slowly out onto the porch. His hands were shaking violently. Tiana appeared in the doorway behind him, her face pale. She knew. The moment she saw the police, she knew exactly what they had found. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer commanded. My father watched in paralyzed silence as the officer slapped the metal cuffs onto Lucas's wrists. The click of the handcuffs was sharp and loud in the morning air. "You are making a mistake," my mother screamed, rushing forward. "He is a good boy. He didn't do anything. It is a mistake. Ask his sister. She is the one you want. She is the evil one." The detective looked at my mother with pity. "Ma'am, the victim of the theft is his sister. Your son stole $50,000 from her. We have the bank records." My mother stopped screaming. She looked at Lucas. Lucas refused to meet her eyes. He was crying now, snot running down his face, looking small and pathetic. "Lucas," she whispered. "Tell me it isn't true. I am sorry, Mom." Lucas sobbed. "I just needed to borrow it. I was going to pay it back. I swear." The reality hit my mother like a physical blow. Her knees buckled. She did not stumble. She simply collapsed. She hit the porch floor with a dull thud, her eyes rolling back in her head. "Susan," my father yelled, dropping to his knees beside her. "Call an ambulance," Tiana shrieked, but she did not move to help. She was backing away into the house, probably trying to hide her own laptop before the police could seize it. I watched it all from my screen, miles away. I watched the flashing lights of the ambulance reflect off the snow. I watched my brother being shoved into the back of a squad car. I watched the neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains, the same neighbors who had eggs in their hands yesterday. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. There was no joy in this. This was the nuclear option. I had pressed the button, and now the fallout was raining down on everyone. But as I watched the ambulance pull away with my unconscious mother and the police car pull away with my crying brother, I knew one thing for certain. The silence at the dinner table was over. The war had just begun, and I was the only one left standing. The air inside the second precinct smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. It was a scent I knew well from my years as a crisis manager. I had been to police stations a dozen times to bail out the wayward sons of CEOs or to smooth over misunderstandings for politicians. But this time was different. I was not walking in with a briefcase full of non-disclosure agreements and a confident smile. I was walking in as a victim. I was walking in to give my official statement regarding the $50,000 my brother had stolen from me. I clutched my purse tighter to my side. My hands were cold. Even though I knew I was in the right, there is something deeply unsettling about walking into a police station to criminalize your own blood. I had to keep reminding myself of the credit report. I had to keep seeing the charges for the nightclubs and the luxury vacations. I had to remember that while I was eating instant oatmeal to save money for my business, Lucas was drinking Dom Perignon on my dime. I pushed through the double doors into the main lobby. It was a large, sterile room with rows of plastic chairs bolted to the floor. And sitting in the front row looked like the survivors of a shipwreck were my parents. My mother Susan was slumped over her face, buried in a tissue. Her eyes were swollen shut from crying. My father David was pacing back and forth in front of the vending machine. His coat was unbuttoned, his tie was crooked, and he looked 10 years older than he had at dinner last night. When the heavy metal door clicked shut behind me, my father stopped pacing. He looked up. His eyes locked onto mine. There was no warmth in them, only a desperate, frantic intensity. "Harper," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank God, you are here." He rushed toward me. My mother looked up and let out a fresh wail of grief. She scrambled to her feet and grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, painful. "Harper, you have to stop this," she sobbed. "They have him in a cell. They took his shoelaces, Harper. They took his belt. My baby. He is terrified. You have to tell them it was a mistake." I looked down at my mother's hand on my coat. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off. "It was not a mistake, Mom," I said, my voice sounding hollow in the large room. "He stole my identity. He spent $50,000. That is not a mistake. That is a crime." My father stepped into my personal space. He smelled of sweat and fear. "Listen to me, Harper. We do not have time for your drama right now. The detective said that if you drop the charges, if you tell them you authorized the spending as a family loan, they will let him go. We can handle this internally. We can work out a payment plan." "A payment plan?" I repeated. I almost laughed. "Dad Lucas does not have a job. He does not have assets. How is he going to pay me back $50,000? Is he going to pay me $10 a week for the next century? It does not matter," my father snapped, his face reddening. "Money is just paper. Lucas is your brother. He is family. You do not put family in a cage. Now I want you to walk up to that desk sergeant and tell him you want to withdraw the complaint." Immediately. He was using his command voice, the voice he used when I was a teenager and I was 5 minutes late for curfew. He thought he still had that power. He thought he could bully me into submission because for 30 years, that is all he had ever done. I took a step back, creating distance between us. I looked him in the eye. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. My father blinked as if I had spoken a foreign language. "What did you say?" he whispered. "I said no," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "I am not withdrawing the complaint. I am not lying to the police to cover up for Lucas anymore. I am here to provide my statement and hand over the additional evidence my investigator found. Lucas is going to prison, Dad." My mother let out a scream that turned heads across the lobby. 2 officers behind the high desk looked up. A woman waiting to file a report stopped typing on her phone. "You are evil," my mother shrieked. "You are a monster. How can you do this? He is your flesh and blood. He made a mistake. He was just trying to give his wife a good life. He was trying to be a man. He was trying to be a man with my money," I said, cutting her off. "He is 32 years old, Mom. He is not a child. And I am done paying for his mistakes." My father was shaking now. His fists were clenched at his sides. The veins in his neck were throbbing. The pressure of the last 24 hours, the eviction, the foreclosure, the arrest, the humiliation was boiling over. And he needed a target. He needed someone to blame. "You ungrateful little brat," he hissed. "After everything we did for you. We put a roof over your head. We tolerated your coldness, your selfishness. And this is how you repay us. By destroying this family. You destroyed this family," I said calmly. "You destroyed it when you decided that Lucas could do no wrong and I could do no right. You destroyed it when you stole my childhood to pay for his ego. I am just balancing the books." That was the breaking point. My father did not think. He did not look around to see where he was. He just reacted. He lunged forward, his arms swinging in a wide, violent arc. The slap connected with my cheek with a sound like a pistol crack. It was hard. It was vicious. My head snapped to the side. The force of the blow knocked me off balance, and I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the wall. For a second, the entire police station went silent. My cheek burned as if it had been branded. My ear was ringing. I stood there, stunned, my hand coming up to touch the rapidly swelling skin of my face. My father stood panting, his hand still raised. He looked down at his palm, then at me. For a split second, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "You needed that," he spat. "Maybe that will knock some sense into you." My mother was staring with her mouth open. She did not rush to see if I was okay. She just stood there, paralyzed. "Hey," the desk sergeant bellowed. He vaulted over the counter, his hand on his taser. "Stay right where you are." But before the sergeant could reach us, the front doors of the precinct swung open. The sound of sharp, confident heels clicking against the linoleum floor cut through the tension. I did not need to look to know who it was. I had texted her the moment I parked my car. Sarah Jenkins walked in. She was wearing a crimson power suit that cost more than my parents' car. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she was carrying a leather briefcase that looked like a weapon. Sarah was not just my lawyer. She was a shark who smelled blood in the water. She took in the scene in a single glance. She saw me leaning against the wall, clutching my red cheek. She saw my father standing over me, his chest heaving. She saw the police rushing forward. She did not run. She did not shout. She walked straight up to my father and stopped 6 inches from his face. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. "Did you just strike my client?" she asked. Her voice was ice cold. My father blinked, confused by this new arrival. "Who are you?" he stammered. "This is a family matter. She is my daughter. I was just disciplining her." Sarah turned to the desk sergeant who had just arrived at our group. "Officer," she said, her voice projecting clearly to everyone in the room. "I am Sarah Jenkins, legal counsel for Miss Harper Carter. I would like to file an immediate criminal complaint against this man for assault and battery. I also want the security footage from that lobby camera preserved as evidence." My father's face went pale. "Assault," he sputtered. "I just slapped her. I am her father. You cannot arrest a father for disciplining his child." "Sir, she's 29 years old," the sergeant said, grabbing my father's arm and twisting it behind his back. "She is not a child. And you are in a police station. Are you out of your mind?" My mother rushed forward, grabbing Sarah's arm. "Please, you do not understand. We are just stressed. He did not mean it. Please do not arrest him too. We need him to bail out our son." Sarah pulled her arm away, as if my mother was contagious. "Don't touch me," Sarah said. "And frankly, ma'am, you should be more worried about yourself." Sarah turned back to me. Her eyes softened just a fraction. "Harper, are you all right? Do you need a medic?" I shook my head slowly. The stinging in my cheek was fading into a dull throb, but the shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold clarity. I stood up straight. I looked at my father being handcuffed by the sergeant, the same handcuffs that had been on Lucas an hour ago. "I am fine, Sarah," I said. "I just want to finish this." Sarah nodded. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick file. She handed it to the second officer who had arrived. "In addition to the assault charge, we are filing for an emergency restraining order against David and Susan Carter," she stated. "My client is a key witness in a federal identity theft case against their son. This physical attack is a clear attempt at witness intimidation. We want a no-contact order effective immediately. 500 feet, no phone calls, no texts, no third-party contact. Witness intimidation," my father shouted as he was dragged toward the booking area. "I am not intimidating anyone. I am her father. Harper, tell them. Tell them to stop." I watched him struggle. I watched the man who had terrified me for my entire childhood simply because he was louder and bigger than me. Now he was just a criminal in a cheap coat making a scene. I walked over to him. The officer paused, letting me have my moment. I looked my father in the eye. My cheek was throbbing, but I did not flinch. "You are not my father," I said quietly. "You are a defendant. And if you ever touch me again, if you ever come near my home or my business again, Sarah will make sure you spend the rest of your retirement in a cell next to Lucas." "Harper," my mother wailed from the sidelines. "How can you do this to us?" I turned to Sarah. "Let us go file that statement." Sarah put a protective arm around my shoulders. She guided me past my weeping mother, past the shocked onlookers toward the interview rooms in the back. As we walked away, I heard the heavy metal door slam shut on the holding cell area. The sound echoed through the station. It sounded like the closing of a book. The chapter of my life where I was the victim was officially over. I touched my cheek one last time. It hurt, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of a severance package. I had just fired my family, and for the first time in my life, I was completely free. I left the precinct with a throbbing cheek and a heart that felt like it had been turned to stone. The physical pain of my father's slap was fading, replaced by a cold, dull ache that settled deep in my bones. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time watching the gray slush of the Chicago winter melt off my windshield. I had done it. I had pressed the nuclear button. My brother was in a cell, my father was facing assault charges, and my mother was likely sedated in a hospital bed. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt free. Instead, I just felt tired. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I stared at it, expecting another hate message from a neighbor or a pleading voicemail from a distant relative. But it was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. The preview on the screen was short, desperate, and chilling. Don't ignore this. I have something that will bury him forever. Meet me at the grind on 4th Street. 30 minutes. Come alone, or I delete everything. I knew who it was immediately. There was only one person left in this tragedy who would be looking to cut a deal. Tiana. I debated driving home. I debated blocking the number and letting the police handle the rest. But the curiosity of a crisis manager is a dangerous thing. I needed to know what she had. I needed to know how deep the rot in my family really went. I put the car in gear and drove toward the city. The coffee shop was a dimly lit industrial chic spot that was too expensive for the old Tiana, but perfect for the clandestine meeting she wanted. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a booth in the back facing the door. I ordered a black coffee and waited. My hands were wrapped around the warm mug, not for heat, but to stop them from shaking. When Tiana walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who had sneered at me over Christmas dinner, the woman who wore designer knockoffs and looked down on my existence, was gone. In her place was a ghost. She was wearing a baggy grey sweatshirt and leggings. Her hair, usually perfectly blow-dried, was pulled back in a messy knot. She wasn't wearing makeup, and in the harsh overhead lights, she looked 10 years older. Her eyes were red-rimmed, darting around the room nervously like a cornered animal. She spotted me and rushed over, sliding into the booth opposite me. She didn't say hello. She didn't order a drink. She just put a small battered USB drive on the table and covered it with her hand. "You look like hell, Harper," she said, her voice raspy. I took a sip of my coffee, staring at her calmly. I wasn't the one who spent the morning watching my husband get handcuffed, Tiana. I wasn't the one who realized my gravy train just derailed. So I think I'm doing just fine. She flinched. The bravado was thin. She looked down at her hands. I noticed her manicure was chipped, her cuticles raw. "I'm leaving him," she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "How noble of you. The ship hits the iceberg and the first rat jumps overboard. I'm not surprised." "It's not like that," she hissed, her eyes flashing with a spark of her old anger. "You don't know what it's been like. You think Lucas is just a lazy golden boy. You think he's just a harmless idiot who borrows money. You have no idea, Harper. You escaped. You got out. I've been living in that house listening to his schemes, watching him spiral." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I'm listening, but make it quick. I have a restraining order to finalize." Tiana leaned in, lowering her voice. "Lucas isn't just stealing your identity, Harper. And the identity theft, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's just what he did to pay off the gambling debts. The real problem is his job." "He doesn't have a job," I said. "He's a director of sales for a pyramid scheme." "That's what we told your parents," Tiana said, shaking her head. "That's what he told me at first. But 6 months ago, he got involved with some people. Bad people. He's not selling protein shakes, Harper. He's moving money." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Moving money? You mean laundering?" Tiana nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He set up shell companies, fake consulting firms. He takes cash from associates, deposits. It moves it through 3 different accounts and then wires it out as legitimate business expenses. He thinks he's a genius. He thinks he's the Wolf of Wall Street. But he's sloppy. He leaves paper trails everywhere." I looked at the USB drive under her hand. And that is everything she breathed. Ledgers, emails, bank routing numbers, names of the people he's washing money for. I copied his hard drive while he was sleeping last week. I knew this was coming. I knew he was going to crash eventually, and I needed an insurance policy. I stared at her with a mix of disgust and admiration. "You were planning to blackmail your own husband," I was planning to survive. She snapped, her voice rising before she caught herself. Look, Harper, I'm not a saint. I like nice things. I like the lifestyle. But I'm not going to federal prison for him. If the feds look into his accounts, they're going to look at mine too. They're going to see the transfers. I need immunity, and I need a way out. So go to the police, I said. Hand over the drive. Cut a deal. Why are you talking to me? Because the police won't give me what I need, she said, her voice trembling. They might give me immunity, sure, but they won't give me a future. They won't give me the means to disappear. She took a deep breath, and then she dropped the bomb. I'm pregnant, Harper. The world stopped for a second. The noise of the coffee grinder, the chatter of the other customers, it all faded into a dull buzz. I looked at her stomach. It was hidden under the baggy sweatshirt. You're lying, I said, automatically. I'm 12 weeks, she said, tears finally spilling over. I found out right before Christmas. That's why I was so desperate about the Lexus. That's why I needed the money. I wasn't trying to buy jewelry. I was trying to stockpile cash so I could leave him before the baby came. I don't want my child raised by a felon. I don't want my child raised in that house with your parents telling him he's a prince while they drown in debt. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was an ultrasound image, a grainy black and white photo of a tiny smudge of life. I stared at the photo. My niece or nephew, a new generation of this cursed family. I need a clean break, Harper, Tiana pleaded. I need a divorce lawyer. I need an apartment in a different state. I need to start over where Lucas and your parents can't find me. But I have $0 to my name. Lucas drained our joint account yesterday before the cops came. So here is the deal. She continued pushing the USB drive toward me. You want to destroy Lucas? You want to prove to your parents that their golden child is a criminal. This drive doesn't just put him away for identity theft. This puts him away for 20 years. This exposes the whole lie. You give me $50,000, the same amount he stole from you, and I give you the drive. I walk away. I file for divorce. I disappear. You get your justice, and I get a chance to save this baby. I looked at the drive. Then I looked at Tiana. This was a moral abyss. She was asking me to pay her for evidence that should be free. She was asking me to fund the escape of the woman who had helped torment me for years. She was the one who had egged on my parents. She was the one who had mocked me. And now she wanted me to be her savior. But the strategist in me, the crisis manager, saw the value. The identity theft charges might not stick if my parents hired a good lawyer and guilt-tripped me into dropping them, or Lucas might get a plea deal, a slap on the wrist, and be back in that house in 6 months playing the victim. But money laundering federal crimes. There is no coming back from that. That is the kind of truth that shatters a family myth permanently. If I had this drive, I could ensure Lucas never hurt anyone again. I could ensure my parents finally saw the reality of the monster they created. But to partner with Tiana, to give her money, it felt like making a deal with the devil. I don't trust you, Tiana, I said quietly. How do I know this isn't blank? How do I know you won't take the money and run back to him? She opened her laptop, which was sitting in her bag. She placed it on the table and booted it up. She plugged in the drive. Look, she said. I leaned forward. She opened a folder. There were hundreds of files, spreadsheets, scanned checks, chat logs encrypted but readable. I saw names, I saw amounts, 10,000 here, 20,000 there, and I saw emails from Lucas boasting about how easy it was to fool the auditors. It was real. It was a smoking gun. I sat back, my mind racing. I am not giving you $50,000, I said. Tiana's face fell. Harper, please, think about the baby. I am not giving you $50,000, I repeated, because that looks like extortion, and I don't commit crimes. I reached into my purse and pulled out my checkbook. Tiana watched me breathless. I will write you a check for $25,000, I said, my voice steel. Consider it a loan, a severance package. You give me the drive. You sign a document stating that you are providing this evidence voluntarily and that you are filing for divorce. And you leave Chicago tonight. 25 isn't enough, she argued weakly. It is enough to get an apartment and a job, I said. You are scrappy, Tiana. You'll figure it out. Take it or leave it, or I can just call the detective right now and tell him you have evidence you are withholding. That makes you an accessory. Do you want to have that baby in a prison infirmary? She paled. She looked at the checkbook, then at the drive. She weighed her options. She realized she had none. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll take it. I wrote the check. My hand was steady. I tore it out and placed it on the table. Tiana reached for it, her fingers trembling. She grabbed the check like a lifeline. I slid the USB drive into my pocket. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. One more thing I said as Tiana began to pack up her laptop. She looked up wary. If you ever contact my parents again, if you ever try to come back to Lucas, if I ever see your name on my social media feed again, I will hand over the emails on this drive that show you were complicit in the early stages. I saw your name on the CC line. Tiana, don't think I didn't. I am buying your silence, but I am also holding your leash. She swallowed hard. I understand. You won't see me again. She stood up. She looked at me one last time. There was no gratitude in her eyes, only the resentment of someone who had been bested. You know, she said, pausing by the booth, your parents are never going to forgive you for this. Even if you prove he's a criminal, they will hate you for destroying their illusion. They would rather live in a lie with him than in the truth with you. I know, I said, taking a sip of my cold coffee. That's why I'm doing it. She walked out of the coffee shop clutching the check that would start her new life. I sat alone in the booth, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. I had just paid my enemy to destroy my brother. I had crossed a line. But as I looked out the window at the gray Chicago sky, I realized something. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was the one holding the pen, and I was about to write the ending of this story whether they liked it or not. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police immediately. I called my lawyer, Sarah. Sarah, I said when she answered, I have something. You're going to want to sit down for this. And Sarah, get the federal prosecutors on the line. We are going to bypass the local precinct. We are going straight to the top. I hung up and walked out into the cold. The wind hit my face, biting and sharp. It felt like a cleansing. The dilemma was over. I had chosen my path. And if it meant burning the family tree to the ground to save myself from the rot, then I would strike the match myself. I drove back to my office feeling a strange mixture of nausea and relief. The USB drive in my pocket felt heavy like a stone that could either anchor me or drag me down. I had crossed a line. I knew that. I had paid $25,000 to a woman I despised in order to secure the evidence that would send my brother to federal prison. It was not the clean, ethical victory I had always imagined. It was messy. It was gray. But in the world of crisis management, I knew that sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to scrub the floor clean. I parked my car in the garage and took the elevator up to my floor. My staff was gone for the day. The office was quiet, lit only by the city lights filtering through the glass walls. I walked to my desk and sat down. My plan was simple. I would make a copy of the drive. I would send the original to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. And then I would go home, pour a glass of wine, and wait for the inevitable explosion. I reached for my laptop to begin the transfer. But before I could plug the drive in, my phone began to vibrate. It was not a call. It was a notification. Then another. Then 100 more. The phone buzzed so violently, it danced across the mahogany surface of my desk. I picked it up. The notifications were coming from Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I opened Twitter. The top trending hashtag in Chicago was not about the weather or the Bears game. It was hashtag Harper the Bully. I clicked on it. The first post was a video uploaded by Tiana. It had been posted 20 minutes ago. It already had 50,000 views. I pressed play. Tiana was sitting in her car. The lighting was poor, casting shadows over her face that made her look terrified and vulnerable. Tears were streaming down her face. She was holding up the check I had just written her. The check for $25,000. Guys, I do not know what to do, she whispered into the camera. I am so scared. My sister-in-law, Harper Carter, just cornered me. She forced me to meet her. She knows I am pregnant, and she knows I have no money because her brother was arrested. She offered me this check. She zoomed in on the check. My signature was clear. The amount was clear. She told me that if I did not plant fake evidence on my husband's computer, she would ruin me. Tiana sobbed. She said she wants to frame him. She said she has friends in the FBI, and if I do not help her destroy Lucas, she will make sure I go to jail too. She tried to buy me. She tried to buy my testimony. Then the video cut to an audio recording. My blood froze. It was the recording of our conversation in the coffee shop, but it was not the conversation we actually had. It was a chopped and screwed masterpiece of manipulation. Tiana, or someone she hired, had spliced my sentences together, removing all context, removing her demands, and leaving only my threats. The audio crackled. "I will write you a check for $25,000. My voice said cold and transactional. "Consider it a loan. You sign a document stating that you are providing this evidence. Or I can just call the detective right now. Do you want to have that baby in a prison infirmary?" It stopped there. It left out the part where she demanded $50,000. It left out the part where she admitted Lucas was laundering money. It left out the part where she begged me for a way out. In the edited clip, I sounded like a monster. I sounded like a rich, vindictive sociopath, using her wealth to blackmail a pregnant woman into framing her own brother. I dropped the phone. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "No." I scrambled to my computer. I refreshed the page. The comments were pouring in like sewage. "This woman is a demon. She's trying to frame her brother to steal the inheritance. Look at how she treats a pregnant woman. Boycott her firm. Lock her up." I grabbed the USB drive. I shoved it into my computer. I needed to see the files. I needed to prove that the evidence was real, that I didn't plant it. The drive mounted. I opened the folder. It was empty. My heart stopped. I clicked on properties. 0 bytes. She had played me. She had given me a blank drive. She had baited me into writing a check, recorded me, and then handed me a useless piece of plastic. There was no evidence of money laundering on this drive. If I went to the police now, I would look exactly like Tiana said I would. A woman trying to manufacture a crime. I had walked into a trap set by a woman I underestimated because I thought she was desperate. I forgot that a desperate rat is the most dangerous animal in the alley. My office phone rang. The landline. I stared at it. Only a few people called that line after hours. I picked it up. "Harper Carter." "Harper, it is Marcus." His voice was not angry. It was not disappointed. It was distant. It was the voice of a man cutting off a gangrenous limb. "I assume you have seen the video," he said. "Marcus, listen to me." I pleaded, my voice rising in panic. "It is a setup. The drive she gave me is blank. She edited the tape. I was trying to get real evidence of money laundering. She is the one who asked for the money. It does not matter, Harper." Marcus cut me off. "In our business, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that my lead crisis manager is a blackmailer who targets pregnant women. We have morals clauses in our contracts for a reason. Marcus, please, I can prove it. Give me 24 hours. I cannot give you 24 minutes, Harper. The board is already drafting a press release. We are terminating our retainer agreement, effective immediately. We are also putting out a statement distancing ourselves from your personal conduct. But the merger," I stammered. "The strategy I built for you is property of the firm," Marcus said. "You are done, Harper. Pack your things. Your access card will be deactivated in 1 hour." The line went dead. I sat there, listening to the dial tone. In the span of an hour, I had lost $25,000, my reputation, my biggest client, and my career. I was not the fixer anymore. I was the broken thing. I packed a box. I did it mechanically. My award for top PR strategist. A framed photo of my dog. My notebook. I left the rest. I walked out of the glass office I had worked so hard to build. The security guard at the front desk, a man I brought coffee to every morning, refused to look me in the eye as I handed him my badge. I drove home in a daze. The city looked different. The lights seemed harsher, the shadows deeper. Every car that passed me felt like an enemy. I felt exposed, naked. I entered my apartment. It was a beautiful apartment. High ceilings, modern art, the kind of place that screams success. Now it felt like a cage. I didn't turn on the lights. I couldn't bear to see the things I was about to lose. I couldn't pay the mortgage on this place without the sterling contract. I couldn't pay the mortgage on my parents' house either. I sank onto the floor in the living room, leaning my back against the cold leather of my sofa. I pulled my knees to my chest. I was 31 years old. I had done everything right. I had worked hard. I had saved. I had tried to be the responsible one. And I had been destroyed by people who had never worked an honest day in their lives. I closed my eyes and let the darkness swallow me. I thought about the drive, the blank drive. I thought about Tiana's fake tears. I thought about Lucas in his cell, probably laughing now as his lawyer showed him the video. They had flipped the board. They had turned my competence into a crime and their criminality into victimhood. My cell phone rang again. I didn't want to answer it. I wanted to throw it off the balcony, but the ringing was persistent. It cut through the silence of the apartment like a drill. I looked at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize, probably a reporter, or a lawyer serving me with a lawsuit. I swiped answer. I didn't say anything. I just held the phone to my ear and breathed. "Hello, Harper." The voice was familiar. It was raspy, smug, and dripping with satisfaction. It was my father. "Dad," I whispered. "I thought you were in jail." "I was," he said cheerfully. But a funny thing happened. Tiana came down to the station with a very interesting video, and suddenly the district attorney wasn't so interested in Lucas's credit card charges anymore. He was much more interested in your little extortion attempt. He laughed. It was a dry hacking sound. "We are out on bail, Harper. Tiana paid for it. With your money. Isn't that poetic?" I felt the bile rise in my throat. "What do you want, Dad?" "I want what is mine," he said, his voice hardening. "I saw the news, Harper. You are finished. Your fancy clients are dropping you like a hot potato. You have no income. You have no friends. You are all alone in that big, empty apartment." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Here is how this is going to go," he continued. "Tomorrow morning, you are going to meet us at our lawyer's office. You are going to sign a document transferring the deed of the house back to me. You are going to drop the identity theft charges against Lucas formally. And you are going to issue a public apology admitting you made the whole thing up because you were jealous of your brother's success. And if I don't," I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "If you don't, Tiana releases the rest of the audio," he said. "The part where you threaten to destroy us. And we file a civil suit for malicious prosecution. We will take your apartment. We will take your car. We will take every penny you have left." He paused, savoring the moment. "See, Harper, you thought you were smart. You thought you could buy your way out of being a daughter. But you forgot one thing. Family sticks together. And you are just the bank." I sat there in the dark. The city lights of Chicago twinkled mockingly outside my window. I was cornered. I was beaten. I had no evidence. I had no allies. And the people who were supposed to love me were holding a gun to my head. "Make the appointment," I whispered. "Good girl," my father said. "See you at 9. Don't be late." He hung up. I lowered the phone. The silence returned heavier than before. I was going to lose the house. I was going to lose my dignity. I was going to have to apologize to the people who stole from me. I looked at the blank USB drive still sitting on my coffee table. It was a symbol of my failure. But then a thought struck me. A tiny, dangerous spark in the dark. Tiana said she copied Lucas's hard drive. She gave me a blank copy, but she kept the original. She had to. It was her insurance policy against Lucas. She wouldn't destroy it. She was too smart for that. She needed it in case Lucas turned on her. She had played me, but she was still playing a dangerous game with him. I wasn't the bank. My father was wrong. I stood up. I walked to the window. I wiped the tears from my face. "I am not the bank," I said to the empty room. "I am the crisis manager. And this crisis isn't over yet." I looked at the time. It was 10 p.m. I had 11 hours until the meeting. 11 hours to find where Tiana hid the real drive. 11 hours to turn this tragedy into a trap. I picked up my phone. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call a friend. I dialed Silas again. "Silas," I said when he picked up. "I saw the video, Harper," he said gently. "I am sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Get your gear. We are going to break into a house." I sat in the dark of my living room with the phone in my hand and the echo of my father's threats still ringing in my ears. For a moment, I felt the urge to throw the device against the wall, to curl up in a ball and let the waves of panic drown me. My father was right. I was alone. My career was in ashes. My reputation was destroyed. I was facing a synchronized attack from the people who knew my weaknesses better than anyone else. But as I stared at the city lights of Chicago blinking indifferently outside my window, something inside me shifted. The tears that had been blurring my vision stopped. They didn't dry up, they just stopped flowing. It was a physical sensation, like a faucet being turned off by a rusty handle. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the harsh vanity light and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My mascara was smeared. My cheek was still slightly swollen from where my father had slapped me. I looked like a victim. I looked like the broken little girl they wanted me to be. I reached for a washcloth and ran it under freezing cold water. I scrubbed my face hard. I scrubbed away the pity. I scrubbed away the daughter. I scrubbed away the sister. When I looked up again, the face in the mirror was different. The eyes were cold. The jaw was set. This was not Harper, the family disappointment. This was Harper, the fixer. This was the woman who had buried scandals for senators and silenced blackmailers for billionaires. I had spent 10 years cleaning up other people's messes while letting my own family treat me like a doormat. I had applied my genius to strangers while leaving my heart unguarded for my blood. That ended tonight. I walked into my home office. It was a small room, soundproofed and secure, separate from the rest of the apartment. I sat down at my desk, not the glass one at the firm, but my personal workspace. I opened a drawer that was locked with a biometric fingerprint scanner. Inside was a laptop. It was a matte black machine with no branding, no stickers, and no connection to my corporate identity. This was my option Z. In the world of crisis management, option A is negotiation. Option B is legal pressure. Option C is media manipulation. Option Z is total war. It is the option you use when the rules of engagement no longer apply. It contains software that exists in the gray areas of the law tools for data extraction, password cracking, and deep web surveillance. I had never used it on my family. I had always thought there was a line I shouldn't cross, but my father had just crossed it for me. I booted up the machine. The screen glowed with a terminal command prompt. I didn't need to break into my parents' house physically. We live in a digital age. People leave their doors unlocked every day. They just don't realize it because the doors are in the cloud. I knew my target. Lucas. My brother was arrogant. He was the kind of man who believed he was too smart to get caught and too important to follow basic security protocols. He lived his life online, posting every meal, every vacation, and every thought. But I knew his secrets. I knew he used a specific cloud storage service for his personal files, because he had once asked me to pay for the upgrade to 2 terabytes. I pulled up the login page for the cloud service. I entered his email address, lucasking88@gmail.com. Then came the password field. I stared at the blinking cursor. This was the moment that would define just how predictable my brother really was. Most people use variations of the same 3 passwords for everything. A pet's name, a sports team, a graduation year. But Lucas was a narcissist with a dependency issue. He viewed people as utilities. I tried his wedding anniversary. Access denied. I tried his son's name. Access denied. I tried the word password 123. Access denied. Then I stopped and thought about how Lucas saw the world. Who was the most important person in his life? Himself. But who facilitated his life? Who paid for the roof over his head? Who was the safety net he resented but couldn't live without? I typed in 8 digits, 07121994, July 12th, 1994. My birthday. I hit enter. The screen loaded. The progress bar spun for a second that felt like an hour. And then the dashboard opened. Welcome back, Lucas. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. It was so perfect, it was sickening. My brother, the golden child, the one who publicly despised me and privately stole from me, used my birthday as the password to his digital life. It wasn't out of love, it was out of ownership. He viewed me as a possession, a resource. Of course, his password was my birthday. In his mind, I existed solely to unlock things for him. I was in. I navigated to his folders. It was a chaotic mess of downloaded movies, pirated games, and thousands of selfies. But I knew what I was looking for. Tiana had said she copied his hard drive. She said there were ledgers. If Tiana had them, Lucas had them. And Lucas being Lucas, he wouldn't delete them. He would archive them, thinking he might need them later to prove how smart he was. I found a folder labeled distinctively, "Do Not Touch." It was so childish, I almost rolled my eyes. I opened it. Inside were subfolders organized by year. I clicked on the current year. My breath caught in my throat. Tiana hadn't been lying about the money laundering. She had just been lying about her role in it. The files were extensive. There were PDF invoices from shell companies with names like Apex Consulting and Blue Horizon Logistics. I opened one. It was an invoice for $40,000 for strategic advisory services. The recipient was a company called Miller Construction. I knew that name. Miller Construction was a massive contracting firm in the suburbs. It was owned by Tiana's father, my brother's father-in-law. I opened another file. It was a spreadsheet tracking cash flows. It showed deposits of cash into Lucas's personal accounts, followed by immediate transfers to these shell companies, followed by payments back to Miller Construction for equipment rentals that clearly never happened. I was looking at a classic wash cycle. They were taking dirty money likely from under the table. Construction deals or kickbacks, filtering it through Lucas's accounts to make it look like consulting fees, and then funneling it back to Tiana's father clean as a whistle. Lucas wasn't the mastermind. He was the mule. He was the disposable idiot Tiana's family was using to scrub their books. And then I found the smoking gun. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was an email thread saved as a PDF. The subject line was "The Split." It was a conversation between Lucas, Tiana, and her father. In the email, Tiana wrote explicitly, "Dad, make sure the transfer for the Lexus lease goes through the Harper account. We need to keep our joint account clean for the mortgage application. If the IRS looks, they will just see Lucas doing freelance work. Harper never checks her credit statements anyway, she's too busy working. We can use her identity as a buffer if things get hot." I stared at the screen. My hand hovered over the trackpad. Tiana wasn't a victim. She wasn't a scared, pregnant woman trying to escape a criminal husband. She was the architect. She had orchestrated the identity theft not just to pay bills, but to set me up as the fall guy for their laundering operation. They were building a paper trail that led directly to me. If the feds investigated, they would see my name, my social security number, and my credit cards mixed in with the dirty money. They weren't just stealing from me. They were framing me. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest that was hotter than any anger I had ever known. This was premeditated destruction. They had sat around a dinner table, perhaps the very table I bought for them, and planned how to sacrifice me to save themselves. I started downloading everything, every invoice, every email, every bank statement. I didn't just copy it to my laptop. I mirrored it to 3 secure offsite servers in Switzerland and Singapore. I created a digital fortress of evidence that no amount of crying or fake videos could penetrate. But I wasn't done. I needed to know the full extent of Tiana's father's involvement. If I could take down Miller Construction, I wouldn't just be stopping my brother. I would be destroying Tiana's safety net. I would be bankrupting the family that taught her how to be a predator. I opened a new terminal window. I ran a background check on Miller Construction using a proprietary database my firm subscribed to. The results flooded the screen. Several OSHA violations, a pending lawsuit for wage theft, and a flagged transaction from the IRS 3 years ago that had been settled out of court. They were vulnerable. They were sloppy. I went back to Lucas's cloud. I found a folder named Blackmail. My heart hammered. I opened it. It contained photos. Photos of Tiana's father shaking hands with a city building inspector who was currently under indictment for bribery. Lucas had kept it. Of course he had. He didn't trust his in-laws any more than they trusted him. He was keeping leverage in case they tried to cut him out. I sat back in my chair. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a satisfying snap. I had everything. I had the identity theft evidence. I had the money laundering trail. I had the conspiracy charges involving Tiana. And I had the corruption evidence against her father. I looked at the clock. It was 3 in the morning. My meeting with my parents and their lawyer was at 9. 6 hours. I had spent the last 24 hours reacting. I had been on defense, dodging blows, trying to explain myself, trying to be reasonable. I had let them dictate the tempo of the game. I closed the laptop with a soft click. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number, not Silas, not my lawyer. I dialed the tip line for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I didn't speak to a person. I left a message on the whistleblower hotline. My name is Harper Carter. I am sending a digital packet to the secure portal regarding Miller Construction and an individual named Lucas Carter. You are going to want to see this before 9 a.m. Then I stood up and walked to my closet. I pushed aside the soft sweaters and the comfortable jeans. I reached for the back where I kept my armor. I pulled out a black tailored suit. Sharp, severe, expensive. I wasn't going to that meeting to surrender. I wasn't going to sign over my house. I was going to walk into that office, and I was going to burn their entire world to the ground with a smile on my face. Option Z was active, and the target was locked. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. The sun was rising over Lake Michigan, casting a pale, cold light into my living room. I was dressed in my black suit, my hair pulled back into a tight, severe ponytail. I looked like a woman going to a funeral or a woman going to war. In my line of work, those two things are often the same. I set up my professional ring light and my high-definition webcam. I did not use my phone. I did not use Instagram or TikTok. I logged into my professional LinkedIn account and my YouTube channel, the ones that had been bombarded with hate speech for the last 12 hours. I titled the stream simply The Ledger. I watched the view count tick up. It started at 0, then 10, then 100, then 5,000. The algorithm was pushing it. People wanted to see the disgraced crisis manager break down. They wanted to see me cry. They wanted to see me beg for forgiveness for extorting my pregnant sister-in-law. I looked directly into the lens. I did not smile. I did not cry. I sat with the posture of a queen on a throne of bayonets. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady and crystal clear. "My name is Harper Carter. By now you have all heard the audio recording released by Tiana Carter. You have heard the accusations that I am a blackmailer, that I am abusive to the elderly, and that I am a failure who is jealous of my family's success." I paused, letting the silence build. I am a crisis manager. My job is to manage the truth, and the truth is not a feeling. The truth is not a tearful video shot in a car. The truth is data. The truth is math. And today, we are going to do some accounting. I pressed a key on my laptop. The screen behind me, which I had synced to the stream, lit up. "Exhibit A," I said. A document appeared on the screen. It was a hospital billing statement from Northwestern Memorial Hospital dated 14 months ago. This is the invoice for David Carter's triple bypass heart surgery. I narrated cold and precise. My father told everyone that his insurance covered the procedure. He told the neighbors that his premium plan took care of everything. But here is the rejection letter from his insurance provider stating that the surgery was elective and out of network. The total cost was $212,000. I clicked the next slide. It was a bank transfer receipt. And here is the wire transfer from Hallowell Holdings, my LLC, paying that bill in full. I paid it anonymously so my father could keep his pride. I paid it so he wouldn't have to declare bankruptcy. The man who slapped me in a police station yesterday is alive today because I wrote a check that he never thanked me for. The comments section on the side of the screen began to slow down. The stream of hate emojis was replaced by question marks. I moved on. "Exhibit B," I said. The eviction. I pulled up the mortgage statements. For 3 years, I have paid the mortgage property taxes and insurance on 45 Maple Avenue. My parents have lived there rent-free. The eviction notice I served on Christmas was not an act of cruelty. It was a reaction to this. I displayed the letter from the bank showing the foreclosure proceedings that had started before I bought the debt. They were losing the house anyway. I saved it. And in return, they treated me like a trespasser in my own investment. "Now let us talk about Tiana," I said. My voice dropped an octave. It became dangerous. Tiana released an audio recording yesterday. She claimed I tried to bribe her to frame my brother. She claimed she was a terrified victim. I reached up to the lapel of my blazer. I touched the small black button near my collar. "In my line of work, I deal with liars and extortionists every day," I said. "I never walk into a hostile meeting without insurance. This is a high-definition body camera. It records audio and video in 4K resolution." I pressed play on the media player. The video on the screen showed the interior of the coffee shop. It showed Tiana sitting across from me. It showed her face, clearly not the terrified victim from her car video, but the calculating predator she really was. The audio played loud and clear. "I need immunity," Tiana's voice said from the screen. "And I need a way out. Lucas isn't just stealing your identity, Harper. He is laundering money." The internet watched as Tiana admitted to everything. They watched her demand $50,000. They heard me refuse. They heard me offer $25,000 as a settlement. They heard the context that she had conveniently edited out. The comments section exploded. She lied. "Oh my God, she set her up. Release the rest." I wasn't done. I had one more nail to drive into the coffin. This one was for Lucas. This one was the payoff that would destroy the alliance between my brother and his wife forever. "I know my parents are watching this," I said, looking into the camera. I know you are sitting in your lawyer's office right now, waiting for me to arrive and surrender. I know Lucas is there probably feeling very smug that his wife saved him. I leaned in closer to the lens. Lucas, you think Tiana did this to protect you. You think she edited that tape because she loves you. You think she is the loyal wife standing by her man. I clicked the final folder. Exhibit C, I said. The escape plan. I pulled up the emails I had scraped from Lucas's cloud, the ones Tiana had sent to her secret lover. But the lover wasn't a stranger. The email address belonged to the family attorney, the very man my parents were sitting with right now. I read the email aloud. As soon as Lucas takes the fall for the money laundering, we take the cash in the Cayman account and leave. He is stupid enough to sign anything. By the time he realizes I testified against him, we will be in non-extradition territory. I can't wait to be rid of him and his pathetic family. I displayed the flight itinerary. 2 one-way tickets to Belize, departing tonight at 11 p.m. The passenger names were Tiana Carter and Mark Reynolds, the family lawyer. There was no ticket for Lucas. I also pulled up a screenshot of a pregnancy test result from a clinic. It was dated 3 months ago. And one more thing I said. Tiana claimed she's 12 weeks pregnant with your child Lucas. But here is a bill from a termination clinic dated 2 months ago. There is no baby Lucas. She kept the positive test result to manipulate you and mom. She's not pregnant. She's just a con artist who played you all for fools. I sat back. The evidence was on the screen. The truth was out there in the digital ether, and it could never be pulled back. I addressed the camera one last time. My name is Harper Carter. I am not a failure. I am the reason you still have a roof over your heads and a pulse in your veins. But as of this moment, the bank is closed. The fixer is retired, and the daughter you abused is gone. I reached out and clicked end stream. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of my apartment. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my hands were steady. It was done. I checked the time. It was 8:45. I stood up and smoothed down my suit jacket. I picked up my purse. I didn't need to bring the USB drive. I didn't need to bring the files. The whole world had the files now. I walked to the elevator. I had a meeting to attend. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into that room to beg for their approval. I was walking in to accept their surrender. I did not close my laptop after ending the live stream. I did not celebrate. I simply opened a new tab on my browser and logged into the security interface for the house on Maple Avenue. I had just dropped a bomb on my family from 10 miles away, and now I was going to watch the explosion in high definition. The feed loaded. The living room was bathed in the morning sunlight that filtered through the sheer curtains my mother loved so much. Tiana was sitting on the sofa, her face buried in her phone, scrolling frantically through the comments on my video. Lucas was standing in the middle of the room holding his tablet. I watched as the realization hit him. It was a physical blow. His knees actually buckled. He dropped the tablet onto the hardwood floor. The screen shattered, but he did not seem to notice. He looked at Tiana. For the first time in his life, he was not looking at her with adoration or lust. He was looking at her with the raw, horrified clarity of a man who realizes he has been sleeping next to a viper. "Tiana," he whispered. The microphone on the security camera picked it up clearly. Tiana did not look up. She was too busy trying to delete her Instagram account. Lucas walked over to her. He snatched the phone out of her hand and threw it across the room. It smashed into the antique china cabinet that held my mother's wedding plates. "Is it true?" he screamed. The sound distorted the audio feed for a second. "Is it true? There is no baby." Tiana stood up. The mask was gone. There were no tears. There was no fear. There was only the ugly sneer of a woman who had been caught and no longer saw the point in pretending. "You are such an idiot, Lucas," she spat back. "Of course there is no baby. Did you really think I wanted to tie myself to a loser like you for 18 years? I wanted the money. I wanted the house. I wanted out." Lucas looked like he was going to vomit. He stepped back, shaking his head. "But the tickets. Mark Reynolds, you were leaving me. You were going to let me go to prison for 20 years while you ran off with the lawyer." Tiana laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Someone had to take the fall, Lucas. And let us be honest, you were born to be a patsy. You are just like your parents. Weak, gullible, desperate to be special. Harper was the only one in this family with a brain, and even she was easy to manipulate until today. That broke him. The golden child. The prince of the Carter dynasty let out a roar of pure animal rage. He didn't hit her. He turned and punched the wall. His fist went straight through the drywall, leaving a gaping hole in the plaster. "This is my house," I said softly to my empty apartment, watching him destroy my property. But he didn't stop. He grabbed the coffee table and flipped it over. He grabbed the lamp and smashed it against the floor. He was destroying the stage of his own failure. Tiana started screaming back at him, clawing at his face, trying to get past him to the door. She had her suitcase near the entryway. She tried to grab it, but Lucas kicked it away, sending clothes and toiletries flying across the room. "You are not going anywhere," he yelled, grabbing her arm. "You are going to jail with me. We are going down together. Get off me, you loser," Tiana shrieked. She slapped him hard across the face, drawing blood. They were a whirlwind of violence and hatred, tearing apart the living room that my parents had kept pristine for 30 years. They knocked over the Christmas tree. Ornaments shattered. The star fell off the top and crushed under Tiana's heel. Then I saw the blue lights. The neighbors had called the police again. Brenda from next door probably had 911 on speed dial by now. The front door burst open. This time the police did not knock. 3 officers rushed in, tasers drawn. "Police, get on the ground," one of them shouted. Lucas and Tiana froze. They were panting, bleeding, standing amidst the wreckage of their marriage and my house. Tiana immediately tried to switch roles. She fell to her knees, raising her hands, trying to summon tears. "Officer, help me," she wailed. "He is crazy. He is attacking me. I am pregnant. Please help me." But the police were not buying it. Not today. Not after the video I had just released to the world. "Ma'am, save it," the officer said, pulling her up roughly. "We saw the live stream. You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and domestic battery." They cuffed her. She screamed. She cursed. She called them pigs. She called Lucas a coward. Then they grabbed Lucas. He did not fight. He let them pull his arms behind his back. He looked defeated. He looked hollow. He looked at Tiana as she was dragged out the door, kicking and screaming, and then he looked at the camera. He looked right at the lens, right at me. "I am sorry," he mouthed. I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just the cold confirmation of a job well done. They dragged him out. The house was suddenly quiet. The only sound was the wind blowing through the open front door and the distant wail of sirens fading down the street. Then I saw movement in the hallway. My parents stepped into the living room. They had been upstairs hiding during the fight. My father David was wearing his bathrobe. My mother Susan was clutching her rosary. They looked around the room. They saw the hole in the wall. They saw the shattered china. They saw the overturned furniture and the ruined Christmas tree. But mostly they saw the empty space where their children used to be. They stood in the center of the ruins. My father looked old. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. He picked up a piece of a broken ornament. It was a ceramic angel that I had made for them in first grade. He held it in his trembling hand. My mother started to cry, but it wasn't the dramatic, manipulative crying she used to get her way. It was the silent, shaking weeping of a woman who realizes she has lost everything. Her son was going to prison. Her daughter-in-law was a con artist. Her house belonged to the daughter she had disowned, and her reputation in the neighborhood was incinerated. They were alone in a house that wasn't theirs, surrounded by the debris of their own choices. My father looked at the camera. He knew I was watching. He knew I had seen it all. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I watched on my screen as he dialed. My own phone sitting on the desk beside me lit up. Dad calling. I stared at the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I could have ignored it. I could have let them sit in the silence. But that wasn't how this ended. The fixer doesn't leave loose ends. The fixer closes the file. I reached out and swiped the green button. I put the phone to my ear. "Hello, Harper." My father's voice was barely a whisper. It cracked with the weight of his shame. "Harper, please." I leaned back in my chair, looking at the image of my broken parents on the screen. "I am here, Dad," I said, my voice calm and final. "I am listening." The silence on the line was heavy. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a funeral or a car crash. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the ragged breathing of my father David. On the security monitor, I could see him standing in the middle of the ruined living room, clutching his phone with both hands as if it were a lifeline. My mother Susan was standing next to him, her hands clasped in prayer, her face pale and streaked with mascara. They looked small. They looked defeated. but I knew better than to trust the visual. I knew that beneath the facade of frail elderly parents lay the same two people who had just tried to blackmail me into submission an hour ago. Harper, my father said again, his voice cracking. The arrogance was gone. The boom in his voice that he used to command the dinner table was replaced by a tremor. Harper, look at us. We are old people. Your mother has high blood pressure. I have a heart condition. You know that. You paid for the surgery. And koi. He paused, waiting for me to affirm his fragility. I said nothing. I just watched him on the screen. We made mistakes. He continued, the words tumbling out faster now. We trusted the wrong people. We were blinded by Lucas. We thought he was successful, and we wanted to believe it so badly that we ignored the signs. But we are victims here too, Harper. Tiana fooled us just like she fooled everyone else. She played us against you. He was rewriting history in real time. He was erasing the insults, the slap at the police station, the demands for my property. He was spinning a narrative where he was just a confused old man, not a co-conspirator. You cannot kick us out, Harper, he pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. It is the middle of winter. The forecast says it is going to be 10 degrees tonight. Where will we go? We have no savings. We have no credit. Tiana took the jewelry. Lucas took the cash. If you put us on the street, you are signing our death warrant. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the daughter who froze her parents to death over a house? I listened to the manipulation. It was masterful. He was using my own morality against me. He knew I was the responsible one. He knew I was the one who fixed things. He was betting everything on the fact that I was too weak to be cruel. We are family. Harper, my mother, chimed in from the background. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Blood is thicker than water. We raised you, we fed you, we drove you to soccer practice. Doesn't that count for anything? You can't just throw us away like garbage. We are your parents. I closed my eyes for a second. I remembered the soccer practice. I remembered that I had to walk home most times because they were too busy taking Lucas to his hockey games. I remembered the food they fed me and how they always commented on how much I cost them. I remembered the blood. And I remembered the water. I took a deep breath. I let it out slowly. When I spoke, my voice was devoid of anger. It was devoid of sadness. It was the smooth professional voice of a woman closing a deal. You are right, Dad, I said. On the screen, I saw my father's shoulders drop 3 inches. I saw my mother grab his arm, her eyes widening with hope. I am right, he breathed. Of course I am right. We are family. Family is supposed to take care of each other. I continued, my voice steady. Children have a duty to ensure their parents are safe and housed. It would be monstrous of me to let you sleep on the street. It would be wrong to let you freeze. Yes, exactly, my father stammered. I knew you were a good girl deep down. I knew you wouldn't do this to us. I have been thinking about this for a while, I said. Even before today. Even before the arrest. I knew that financially you were struggling. I knew you couldn't maintain that big house on Maple Avenue. The heating bills alone are too much for your fixed income. And with Lucas gone, you have no one to mow the lawn or shovel the snow. My father nodded enthusiastically at the phone. He was agreeing with everything. He was desperate to secure the win. You are so practical, Harper, he said. That is what I always admired about you. You are smart. You are right. The house is too much work. We are getting too old for the stairs. So I made a decision, I said. I pulled up a document on my laptop screen, not for them to see, but for me to reference. I have secured a new living arrangement for you. A new living arrangement, my father repeated. He looked at my mother. Hope was flooding back into their faces. They were already calculating. They were already imagining a condo downtown, or maybe a nice townhouse near the lake. Yes, I said. I bought a unit. It is fully paid for. The lease is in my name, but you will be the occupants. It is a permanent solution. You won't have to worry about rent. You won't have to worry about utilities. You won't have to worry about maintenance. It is all taken care of. My mother let out a sob of relief. She grabbed the phone from my father. Oh, Harper, thank you, she cried. Thank you, honey. I knew you loved us. I told your father I said Harper has a good heart. She's just tough on the outside. Oh, thank God. Is it nice? Does it have 2 bedrooms? We need a guest room for when Lucas gets out. He will need a place to stay. I almost smiled. Even in her relief, she was planning for Lucas. She was already measuring the drapes for the son who stole from her. It is very secure, Mom, I said. And it is in a quiet neighborhood. You will be very safe there. Where is it? My father asked, taking the phone back. Is it the one near the golf course? I saw some units for sale there last week. Or is it the new development on the north side? I looked at the address on my screen. It is in a specialized community, I said vaguely. It is designed for seniors who need stability. My father laughed. It was a wet, relieved sound. A retirement community. Of course. That makes sense. Like Del Webb. Those are nice. They have pools, right? They have a clubhouse. It has all the necessary amenities, I said. When can we move in? My mother asked. She was already looking around the ruined living room, mentally discarding the broken furniture. We can pack today. We can be out of here by tonight. You can go there right now, I said. The paperwork is signed. The key is waiting for you at the front desk. Harper, I don't know what to say, my father said. His voice was thick with emotion, but it wasn't gratitude. It was the satisfaction of a man who thinks he has regained control. He thought he had manipulated me again. He thought he had played the family card and won the jackpot. He thought that everything was going back to normal just with a different address. You don't have to say anything, Dad, I said. Just pack your personal items. Leave the furniture. Leave the heavy stuff. You won't need it where you are going. Just bring your clothes and your medication. Okay, we will, he said. He sounded energized. He sounded young again. Harper, maybe we can do dinner next week. When we are settled, we can celebrate. Maybe we can even get a lawyer for Lucas now that we don't have to worry about housing costs. We can be a family again. I stared at the screen. The delusion was complete. They truly believed that they could slap me, extort me, and then have me buy them a house and pay for their criminal son's legal defense, all in the span of 24 hours. They believed it because that is how it had always been. I gave, and they took. I will text you the address, I said. It is a bit of a drive, so you should leave soon. I love you, Harper, my mother said. You are a good daughter, my father added. The best. I hung up the phone. I didn't say I love you back. I didn't say thank you. I watched them on the monitor. They hugged each other. My father high-fived the air. My mother started clapping her hands. They looked like they had just won the lottery. I picked up my phone and typed in the address. I hit send. Then I sat back and waited. They thought I was a doormat. They thought I was the bank. They had no idea that I was actually the repo man, and I had just come to collect the final payment on a lifetime of debt. I pulled my Porsche Panamera into the driveway of the house on Maple Avenue for the last time. The engine purred with a low aggressive hum that vibrated through the steering wheel. I kept the car running. I watched as my parents emerged from the front door, struggling with their suitcases. They looked like they were going on a cruise. My mother was wearing her Sunday best, a fur coat that I knew for a fact was fake, but she wore with the haughty arrogance of a duchess. My father was wearing his golf cap and a blazer. They were smiling. They were actually smiling. They threw their bags into the trunk of my car with the energy of teenagers. They climbed into the leather seats, sighing with contentment as the heated seats warmed their backs. This is a beautiful car, Harper, my father said, patting the dashboard. I always knew you had taste. Maybe when we get settled in the new place, I can borrow it for a round of golf. I bet this turns heads at the club. I did not answer. I just put the car in gear and backed out of the driveway. I did not look at the house. I did not look at the hole in the wall or the shattered window. I focused on the road. We drove in silence for the first 20 minutes. My parents filled the air with chatter about the amenities they expected. My mother talked about water aerobics classes. My father speculated about the quality of the steak at the clubhouse. They were building a fantasy castle in the air, brick by delusional brick. Then I turned off the highway. We were not heading toward the lakefront. We were not heading toward the exclusive gated communities in the north. We were heading west into the industrial rust belt of the county. The scenery changed. The manicured lawns and Starbucks drive-thrus disappeared. They were replaced by check cashing stores, pawnshops, and rows of gray identical apartment blocks. My father stopped talking about steak. He looked out the window, a frown creasing his forehead. Harper, are you sure this is the right way? He asked. The GPS must be taking us on a shortcut. This looks like the bad part of town. It is the most direct route. Dad, I said, keeping my eyes forward. I turned the car down a cracked asphalt road. We passed a salvage yard. We passed a factory that had been closed since the 80s. And then we arrived. I stopped the car in front of a squat brick building. The sign out front was faded and peeling. It read Oak Creek Assisted Living. A chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter. In the courtyard, a few elderly people sat in wheelchairs, wrapped in blankets, staring blankly at a dead oak tree. The building was not a ruin, but it was grim. It smelled of institutional cleaner and despair. My mother looked out the window. Her face was the color of ash. "Harper," she whispered. "What is this? Why are we stopping here?" I turned off the engine. The silence in the car was suffocating. "This is it, Mom," I said. "This is your new home." My father laughed nervously. It was a high-pitched sound that cracked in the middle. "Very funny, Harper. Good joke. You're trying to scare us, right? To teach us a lesson. Okay, we get it. Now let us go to the real apartment, the one with the pool." I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to face them. "There is no other apartment, Dad. This is it. Unit 4B. I have paid the rent for 6 months in advance." My father's face went from pale to purple in a second. He scrambled to open the door, but the child lock was on. He pounded on the glass. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "You cannot leave us here. Look at this place. It is a dump. It is for poor people. We are the Carters. We do not live in a place like this." I reached into my purse and pulled out a file folder. I tossed it into his lap. "Open it," I said. He stared at me, breathing hard. "Open it." He opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a spreadsheet. Simple, brutal, undeniable. "That is your financial reality, Dad," I said, my voice calm and cold. I did the math. Without my subsidies, without the mortgage I paid, without the medical bills I covered, and without the credit cards Lucas stole, this is exactly what you can afford. Your combined Social Security check is $2,400 a month. The rent at Oak Creek is $2,200 a month. That leaves you $200 for food and bingo night. My mother started to cry. It was a real cry this time, a terrified sobbing that shook her entire body. "But you have money, Harper," she wailed. "You are rich. You drive a Porsche. You can afford better than this. You are punishing us. You are being cruel." "I am not being cruel, Mum," I said. "I am being fair. For 10 years, I gave you a life you did not earn. I let you pretend you were upper class while I ate ramen noodles. I let you look down on me while standing on a pedestal I built for you. I am not abandoning you. I am just returning you to your factory settings. I am putting you exactly where you would be if I had never been born." I pressed the button to unlock the doors. "Get out," I said. My father looked at me with pure hatred. It was the look of a man who realizes his power is gone forever. "You are an ungrateful wretch," he spat. "I should have disowned you when you quit medical school." "You did, Dad," I replied. "You just forgot to stop cashing my checks." I got out of the car. I opened the trunk and pulled out their suitcases. I set them on the cracked sidewalk. An orderly came out of the glass doors looking bored. He began to walk toward us. I got back into the driver's seat. My parents were standing on the curb. They looked like refugees from a war they had started. My mother was clutching her fake fur coat, shivering in the cold wind. My father was yelling something, but the soundproof glass of my car cut him off. I put the car in drive. I did not wave. I did not cry. I pressed the gas pedal, and the Porsche surged forward, leaving them behind in a cloud of exhaust. As I turned onto the main road, putting distance between myself and the grim brick building, my phone rang. It connected to the car's Bluetooth system. The name on the dashboard screen made me pause. Marcus Sterling, the man who had fired me 24 hours ago, the man who had told me I was toxic. I hesitated, then I tapped the answer button on the steering wheel. "Hello, Marcus," I said, my voice neutral. "Harper," his voice boomed through the speakers. It sounded different. It sounded respectful, almost awestruck. "I saw the live stream," he said. "I think the whole damn city saw the live stream." And I asked, "And I have never seen anything like it," he said. "You didn't just clear your name, Harper. You incinerated the opposition. You turned a PR nightmare into a masterclass in crisis management. I had the board of directors on the phone 5 minutes ago. They were terrified of you, and they were impressed. I kept my eyes on the road. The skyline of Chicago was rising in the distance, glittering like a promise. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want you back," he said. "I want the fixer. We have a situation with the merger. The union is threatening a strike, and the press is circling. We need someone who can cut through the noise, someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty." I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. "My rate has gone up, Marcus. Double," he said immediately. "We will pay you double your previous retainer. And a signing bonus. Just come back." We need a shark, Harper, and apparently you are the biggest great white in the water. Send the contract, I said. I will sign it in the morning. I hung up the phone. I accelerated. The engine roared, responding to my touch. I watched the speedometer climb. 60, 70, 80. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The grey, depressing suburb was gone. The nursing home was gone. My parents were gone. They were part of the past, now small figures in a rearview mirror that was rapidly getting smaller. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely. I was free. I had stripped away the dead weight. I had cut out the cancer. I rolled down the window, letting the freezing winter air rush into the car. It bit my skin, but it felt alive. It felt clean. My name is Harper Carter. I am 31 years old. I am the best crisis manager in Chicago. And I just solved my own case. I turned up the radio and drove into the future that I had bought and paid for in full. The road ahead was wide open, and I didn't plan on stopping for anyone.